This video is a recap of what I have learned, reflected, or something like that in our GE 101 Understanding the Self subject for the past 4 months, from Module 1 up to Module 4 specifically. But to tell you the truth, making videos like this is not really my specialty, nor a style that I am comfortable of doing at, but I'll try my best for the sake of this video. Understanding the self is like our philosophy subject back in high school, but even deeper into the void of philosophy in this case. Though unlike in our high school days, especially senior high school, where we have to understand what Socrates or Aristotle views of how the world works, understanding the self, which is obviously in the title, is focused on oneself and nothing else pretty much but yourself. It could be better if this kind of subject were taught to us personally by a teacher in front of his or her students, but we have no choice. Although despite not really getting used to this kind of mode of teaching and learning, surprisingly this is still the case for me even after 2 years, I still have learned a lot in this subject. Like for example, back in September when we got our first and second module of the month. Like any other philosophy back in high school, we have been again briefly reintroduced to the different well-known philosophers like Socrates and his Know Thyself, Plato, which is a student of Socrates, Saint Augustine, who knows Plato but mixing religion of it, Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, and Locke with his tabula rasa, along with Kant, Bede and his theory about the differences between I and me, and more. Most of these were already being taught to us in high school, but it's always good to have a recap of things before diving into a new knowledge which is now our Module 2. In our second module, it immediately introduces us to William James and his self-theory. Similar to Mead theory, it is about the self having two categories, the I and the me. Then we got introduced to another self-theory, but this time from Carl Roger. Though his theory is basically telling that all of us do not have our self at birth, but it was gained through as we age, which I also think kind of similar to what Locke has said in his philosophy. But there's not only the self that is being talked about, but also questions if it's real or not, like how Winnicott's concept of the true and false self. It is basically explained as you yourself currently is the true self, while you that you dream of or plan to be is the false self. We have more theories that get mentioned in our second module, but these are the ones that really got struck into my mind. Moving into our third module was a transition that I honestly did not expect. It is mostly about the self in the present day. Our self, the physical self, which is our body, and how we and others would perceive whether we're fat, tall, beautiful, or not, like that. And the sexual self, where we identify whether we are a male or a female, and each has their own unique genital parts, and a short description of how each works. It also mentioned contraception and its different methods. The material self, which our very own respective properties, distinguishing between the needs and wants of a human being. Well, that still depends on each and every one of us, but you know the point. Next is the spiritual self, where religion takes place. Political self, which explains why we are Filipinos. And lastly, the digital self, which is how we present ourselves on the internet, especially on social media outlets. There's a lot of selves there, but this is basically our third module in a nutshell. Finally, our fourth module, which for me is basically about every student's rant about the educational system. Well, at the very least here in the Philippines. In movies, it is like pinpointing plot holes and stuff, but aside from that, it gives us tips on how to study effectively and become an effective learner. Explains what is success and what it means for it to be called successful. It also briefly mentioned what is stress and different general ways on how to cope up with it. Wrapping all the things up, you can say that all the things I mentioned before is what I truly got into my mind and genuinely learned it. I may have missed some topics in every respective module that was handed to us by our teacher, but I can safely say I still managed to gain a lot more new knowledge to me, and I am very thankful, honestly.